Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Lessons Heard podcast. I am your host, Special Blessing, and this is a podcast that focuses on life as well as all of its experiences and the fact that even though sometimes we might feel like we're alone in certain situations or through certain experiences, we are not. And let me take back the experiences part because sometimes God does isolate us so that we can learn the most in certain experiences, but the emotions that are attached to those experiences are not necessarily unique. And I think that that's important to know because in understanding that those experiences or those emotions are experienced by all kinds of humans, it will help you realize that you can get through it. Okay? So, I'm not a doctor or a therapist yet, but if, like I said, if me sharing my experiences can, or my testimonies can help someone to have a different perspective on things, or to can help someone to feel like there's a possibility for things to change, can give hope, or can just make you feel, like I said, like you're not alone, then I feel that it's my responsibility to do so. And so I will. Okay? So this episode, we're going to talk about letting go. So letting go is something that's important to me because it's something that I struggle with personally. It's also something that if you don't learn how to do, you will get stuck. And that's not what you want to do or where you want to be. So, when I think of letting go, I think about releasing something or forgiveness or surrendering. And so, I'm going to go ahead and define what release is, because that's the first word that I thought of when I thought about letting go in general and what that meant to me. So, release means to set free from restraint, confinement, or servitude. And I feel like they chose those three words specifically for a reason, even though they may sound fairly similar. Uh, there's a difference, so I'm gonna go ahead and define those two. Um, Restraint is a measure or condition that keeps someone or something under control within limits. It's also an emotional, dispassionate, or moderate behavior, which is self control. Confinement is to keep or restrict someone or something within certain limits of space, scope, quantity, or time. It's also to restrain or forbid someone from leaving a place or the borders of or boundaries of a place, especially within regards to restricting their freedom of movement. And then servitude is the state of being a slave or completely subject to someone or something more powerful. Um, I feel like servitude was in this though, in that definition, because if you don't learn to let things go, you become a slave to your emotions and to those experiences. Okay, so back to my definitions. And then release also means to relieve from something that confines, burdens or oppresses, and it also means to give up in favor of another. So, letting go, like I said, is something that I personally have struggled with, and it comes for me in a few different forms. Letting go of people is tough for me because I don't typically let people get that close to me anyway. And when, well, I guess this will go for letting go in general. But letting go can be tough because, especially when you don't, let people get that close to you, to lose them or to have to let them go is even tougher. Whether you thought that they were going to be, in your life forever, or whether you knew it was temporary but you didn't know how long it was going to be, or, it just took you 100% by surprise. Letting go can be the pits, okay? Just being 100% honest. So, one of the things that I had to come to ask myself as a result of, the journey with letting go, as a result of struggling with that, is who am I separate from the things that I feel attached to? And even in that, attachment is a good word because it signifies that it can be removed, right? So just because something is attached to you does not mean that it's a part of you. And if you can realize that or come to terms with that, it'll help you put things into perspective, that nothing is really permanent and things come and go as they please. So letting go, one of the things that I struggle with letting go of is certain emotions. I'm gonna start there, okay? So certain emotions, whether they be positive or negative, it does not matter. But certain emotions I struggle with letting go of because I feel like they are sometimes warranted, or I'm not 100% sure who I am without them, or where I would be without having experienced those emotions. And it sometimes is to my benefit, but sometimes it's also to my detriment. So, an example, I struggle with feeling like a burden, for lack of better terms, because it's something that I've been told, and it's also something that I have wanted to avoid being since I was a kid. And I take that very personally, very seriously, because I don't ever want to feel like my presence or my asking for something or my conversation or any of that is not really wanted. You can tell when people are just like, girl, no. And I'm fairly familiar with that feeling when it comes to having experienced it. But the problem is that while I'm able to identify that, I also put that on to other people who haven't told me that they felt that way. I will take on the feeling, and like I said, it's something that I carry. So I'll take that feeling, and it makes me detach from certain people. It makes me not want to get close because I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to, create any sort of ripple in people's lives as an effect of me just having been there. And it's, like I said, it's to my detriment because it prevents me from having successful relationships with certain people. It prevents me from opening myself up to new relationships or new experiences. And that is why it's so important to let go. Because just because that's what one person said or that's what a few people said does not mean that that's how everybody feels. that is something that's so important to understand. What one person's experience with you may have been, or a few people's experiences with you may have been, is not what it is for everybody else. And that's something that can be tough to unlearn as well. But when you do, it makes you feel freer. And it makes you feel loved, because holding on to those feelings prevents you from getting everything that you really need. It prevents you from saying the things that you need to. And it gets in the way of creating something different. It gets in the way of creating a space that's safe for you, that gives you the opportunity to do something different and to teach someone something different, or to learn something different. And that's not good. That's not good at all. Another thing that I struggle with letting go of is pain. Pain's job has been to protect me and to protect my emotions from getting hurt again. And like, much similar to my thought processes, it prevents me from having successful relationships with certain people. And what I've come to understand is that any relationship involves a risk of getting hurt. But it's all about who you choose to surround yourself by, and letting go of the people that made you feel a certain type of way, like negatively, more particular than anything, even positively sometimes, because there are some wolves in sheep's clothing that look real good and that can make you feel real good, but they are not beneficial for you. And if you know that, you have to let them go. As much as it may hurt, you have to let them go to create space for the people who are good for you, or the people who genuinely do want you there, genuinely do want you around, genuinely do have your best interest at heart. And it may take a minute for them to get there, but I promise that the journey between losing those people, losing certain people or certain thought processes or emotions or whatever, the solitude in between, and then get into the space where you finally are surrounded by all the things that you wanted. That journey is so important to who you are going to become. And it's important as well to how you treat other people, because the experiences that you have, I'll just say experiences and let that include everything, but the experiences that you have come out in how you treat people. And like I said, my experiences with pain or joy, or struggling with certain feelings, has impacted the way that I form relationships, the way that I talk to people or don't talk to people, and it impacts the way that I grow. And if you can't let things go, if you can't figure out why the attachment is so necessary, or what that attachment does for you, whether it be validating you to some degree, and those attachments I feel like are fairly dangerous, because validation, if you do not learn how to validate yourself, you're in for a wild ride. And so, like I said, whether it be validation, or whether it be, feelings of closeness, or, intimacy rather, because that means several different things. Intimacy is not just sex. So whether, like I said, those emotions, or whether it's creating a dynamic of drama that you just feel like you need in order to, and you may not even know, but whether it's creating a dynamic of drama that you feel like you need in order to just be like, okay, this is normal, I'm used to this, that does not prevent it from not being good for you, okay? So, emotions are heavy, and the longer that you hold on to them, the heavier they become, and life goes on, and you just keep carrying your stuff, and the further life progresses, you begin to add other people's stuff to you, and your stuff gets buried under so much stuff that you're just like, okay, this is who I am. I'm always gonna be angry, or I'm always gonna be depressed, or I'm always gonna be lost without this person, or I'm always gonna be happy because of this person or these things, right? So that's where I feel like having a community or a tribe to have these conversations becomes really important, because you can learn from other people's experiences, not only to prevent you from making the same mistakes, but to, even after you've made the mistakes, help you grow. And that is the goal, So let's talk a little bit about how to let go. Some practical steps on how to let go. I've always felt that that's something that when people discuss it, it's like, oh, just do it. Just wake up and let go. Nah, it was not that simple for me. It is not that simple for me. But in a sense, it kind of is, because it's a decision that you make. But I feel like it's a decision that you get up and make every day. It's not something that you're just like, okay, I'm just gonna let the fact that, oh, Bobby hurt my feelings, I'm gonna just wake up and let it go. No. What is it specifically about what Bobby did that hurt my feelings? You know what I'm saying? Like, what was that trigger for me? And then once you figure that out, then you might even find out that it had nothing to do with Bobby in the first place. Okay? It was all about you and something that you experienced that you hadn't come to terms with or let go of yet. And that is what makes all the difference. So having a practical way to do it makes it that much easier, I'll say. Okay? So for me, step one was being honest. Not only with other people, but being honest with myself. Because if I'm not in a space to say that something hurt me, or if I'm not in a space to say that, I didn't like something, or I did like something, or just communicate what's going on in my mind, how is anybody supposed to know? And how can I tell somebody if I don't know for myself? So being honest is so important, because it is the Kickstarter to a difference being made. The next thing is accepting that other people are not you, and that sometimes the same story has different meanings for different people. People can experience the exact same situation the exact same way. Y'all can experience it together and still get two completely different lessons. Nobody is obligated to learn the same thing that you did. Nobody's obligated to feel the same way that you felt about something. And it's good if you get an amen when it comes to certain emotions or whatever. But don't let that stunt your decision making. Don't let that stunt what you do or how you begin to move forward. Okay. Yeah, because if you are attempting to force someone to experience the situation the same way that you did, or experiencing the same way that you did, that's kind of selfish. They had their lessons that they were supposed to learn from that, and they got what they needed. And whether they realize it now or in the future, it was their journey. It's their journey. You are not responsible for nobody but yourself. And to try and take on somebody else when you don't even really have yourself together is not a good idea. Okay? It's not a good idea. All right? And then the next thing would be realizing that you can learn something from any situation. And when you heal, or when you find the lesson, that's when the healing process becomes much more bearable than if you had just continued to sit in the emotions that it caused. So figuring out what you're supposed to learn, that's one thing. Like my pastor, whom I call Sunshine, has taught me. That's one of the biggest lessons. Whenever you're going through something, ask what you're supposed to learn from that. Ask God what you're supposed to learn from that. Because there's always a lesson. There's always a lesson. There's always a lesson involved in anything that you experience. And when you begin to look for that, like I said, it makes it much more bearable, but it makes it worth it. It makes it worth it, because sometimes you just seem like, it's easy to feel like, oh, with certain things, I just wasted my time. Or I just wasted my time. And if you find the lesson, that's what's the most valuable. Okay. Anger is a surface emotion. That was a revelation to me. Anger is something that, even though it may not always seem like it, I have a tendency to hide behind. And my anger is not rah, rah, rah. I'm not a real hostile or a real loud person, but I am petty and passive aggressive, okay? And usually anger is, well, in my experiences, anger covers up hurt. Anger covers up disappointment. But you don't want to say that, or I haven't wanted to say that, because then that means I'm being vulnerable, and it gives you the opportunity to do the exact same thing, maybe in a different way, but still, I'm putting myself on the line to intentionally get my feelings hurt, and I'm not with that business, okay? But if you are able to say that, I've actually found that your emotions is where power is at, because people get real uncomfortable if you tell them that they hurt your feelings. Or people get real uncomfortable if you say, this disappointed me. And really, I feel like that's only if they are not comfortable with themselves and their emotions. Because some people can take that and be like, okay, that wasn't my goal. Like, I was never trying to do that. But I apologize. But for some people, it's just like, no, that didn't happen. I didn't do that. Parents have a real bad habit of that. No, this is not what it was. And how are you going to try and validate my experience? That's what I felt like when it happened. But all that aside, like I said, if you are willing to look beyond the anger and beyond the frustration, you will find what it is that you really are bothered by, that you really feel a way about. And once you get to that, that's when you can start to change things around. Okay? So then we have learn to create or give space for there having been a misunderstanding or for people to grow. That's also important because sometimes you walk around angry for a long time, or walk around feeling hurt for a long time, or just walking around with different emotions, carrying baggage because there was never a clear understanding of what certain situations were. And a conversation goes far. A conversation can make all the difference in the world if you're willing to have it. So create space for the fact that sometimes people just didn't know. They weren't aware of what them doing that would do to you, or even if they were, the fact that they could have potentially changed. They could have experienced something that made them feel differently, or they could have grown even. And letting go, once you realize that, becomes that much easier. Okay? The last thing, maybe it's not. Yeah, okay. So the last thing is express your feelings. So express the way that things made you feel. Talk about it. Have a conversation, because like I said, conversations take you far. Okay? And when you are able to discuss like what the way something made you feel, or when you're able to discuss the way something made you feel, it gives back power, and it also helps you to really, like I said, clarify what things are, what they were or weren't. It's power. It's power. Okay? So, let's see what else is on my paper. Alright. So, I think we're gonna close in a second, but let me just say this. Everything isn't for everybody, and the differences are what make us who we are, and it's a part of growing up. Okay, so a big part of growing up is learning to be okay with other people's decisions regardless of how it makes you feel, and knowing that that's, I mean, even if it wasn't what's best for them in the long run, it was what they felt was best for them at the time. So if you are always trying to correct people,